Hi, Congressman Grayson here.
Hi there, can you hear us?
Make it louder.
You're live at Computers, Freedom, and Privacy 2014 here at Airlie, Virginia.
Hi, Congressman. We have you live here at the conference at Computers, Freedom, and Privacy in Warrenton, Virginia.
Good, thanks. Well, I wish I could join you. This is Congressman Alan Grayson, but of course in the 21st century, it doesn't matter. We've reached the point where technology does things that, as Arthur C. Clarke indicated, are indistinguishable from magic. But the risk that we run is that our lives start to look like another work of fiction, at least fiction until now, the novel 1984. I've been steadily supporting the fight for privacy against domestic spying, and I've seen that the forces arrayed against us are extremely powerful and utterly relentless. To give you just one example, I was shocked to learn, like many Americans, that every time I make a phone call, a note regarding that call is given to the Department of Defense, the NSA, and I was shocked also to see that there were so many people who thought there was nothing wrong with that. The great disappointment as a result of the Snowden revelations has been the lack of public response. There are far more people, it seems, who are willing to fight for the possession of their guns than fight for the possession of their privacy. And that's a shame. But the legislative process in America gives us opportunities from time to time to vote and to try to make progress to protect ourselves from intrusion. The Amash-Conyers Amendment last year was a landmark example of that. I did my best to not only vote for that, but to drum up support for it, and I hope to see the same thing happen again. If you looked at what happened recently with regard to a House vote relating to this issue, we all got rolled. And I think we can expect the same sort of treatment going forward. The forces against privacy are also forces against legislative transparency. They're forces against what we call the regular order here. And they're forces against any sort of limits on their own right, as they see it, to intrude. So it's a tough fight, but it's a fight that's worth making. I think that there is some hope here because I see emerging over time an alliance between civil libertarians like me and large corporate interests who want the freedom from the government and the freedom to provide private services to their clientele, who are influential in both parties. I think that we might see an interesting left chamber alliance moving forward, and I think that might be the key to helping to crack what seems to be an unbroken string of losses, frankly. Losses in our rights, losses in our liberty, losses in our privacy. But I hope to change that. Recently we had one small victory. That victory was my amendment to eliminate the requirement that NIST setting secrecy standards for computers, that NIST take the advice of the NSA. My amendment probably marked the first time of any sort of rollback or reversal since the Snowden revelations in the continuing bad news regarding our privacy. And I hope to expand on that over time. We'll see. But I wanted to save most of my time today for questions and answers. I'm a little bit short of time myself because I'm about to present another amendment on the floor of the House. So if we have the technological capability, let's go to Q&A.
Congressman, whoa, pardon me. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Wonderful, thank you. Hi, this is Kevin Bankston. I'm the Policy Director at the Open Technology Institute of the New America Foundation. And first I wanted to thank you for your work. Oh, can he see me if I stand up? Oh, hi. First I'd like to thank you.
Glasses that make you look very intelligent.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to thank you very much for your work on the NSA surveillance issue. I wanted to get your opinion. You know, many of us supported the USA Freedom Act, but we're very disappointed by the form that it came out of the Judiciary and Intelligence Committees, and even more disappointed by how it was watered down further in consultation with the intelligence community. I'm curious, what is your perspective on whether and to what extent we might be able to improve that bill in the Senate, and how we should proceed if we want to obtain meaningful NSA reform at this point?
Well, I was very disappointed too, and Justin Amash noted, I think through a tweet, that most of the people who had actually co-sponsored the original bill ended up voting against it, which shows the perversion of intentions there. I was particularly disappointed, frankly, with Congressman Sensenbrenner because he has come out as somebody who was very depicted, at least depicting himself, as someone who was very unhappy with the course of events and the abuse of the original provisions, including Section 215 of the Patriot Act, and the notion that relevant to a terrorist investigation somehow means every conceivable action of any human being, and therefore any conceivable action of any human being may be spied upon. He spoke out against that, but he was one who greased the skids to try to weaken this reform and, in fact, potentially authorize bulk collection in most people's eyes for the first time ever. I think that the idea that the original bill authorized bulk collection of records against Americans is very shaky from a legal point of view. I know it's hard to challenge these things in court, but we've seen some signs that the Supreme Court might be willing to take a look at that. Now what they're trying to do is basically cover their tracks by amending their law and putting in things that weren't there in the original law to justify the gross expansion of power that's been asserted by the NSA. I think that the kind of approach that I described earlier, sort of a Wall Street, Main Street approach, that explains that large corporate entities that are very successful and very powerful now on the internet are concerned to preserve the privacy of their clients, and at the same time, ordinary people, people like you, people like me, ordinary people are upset by the idea that the government is intruding into their personal lives. But whether it's receiving information about telephone calls or web browsing or otherwise. So I think that the Senate will be the next point of confrontation. I'm hopeful that we'll see some progress in the Senate, and frankly, we may just reach a point where we're going to have to end up with no bill, because the way things are going, a bad bill is going to be worse than no bill.
Well, thank you very much, and also thank you on your work on NIST and encryption. There's not enough people focused on that issue, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions? I'm staring at a blank wall.
Hi, Congressman Grayson. I'm Pratap Chatterjee from Corp Watch. And
nice to see you again.
It's good to meet you again. I want to thank you for your work on NSA, but also for your work on drone victims and the hearing you held last year when you brought victims from Pakistan to come speak to Congress. And I was wondering if you could perhaps speak to the issue of surveillance contractors, because it's a booming industry, not least of all in the state we are right now, the Commonwealth of Virginia, but also in your state, in Florida. And I came across a company recently called Modus Operandi, and what they are doing is trying to bring the technologies from surveillance in Iraq and Afghanistan back to the United States to surveil people. And I'm wondering if it's possible to have any kind of legislation to look into how contractors use data from many different government agencies to track people. Is there some way to do legislation around the role of surveillance contractors working for government?
Yes, and again, it's good to see you again, Pratap. But to answer your question, there's a fine line between domestic spying and spying through the use of drones. In either case, our liberties are being infringed and abridged on. I passed an amendment last year to defeat a plan that the Department of Homeland Security had developed to take the first generation of drones and to deploy them within the United States. We're talking about weaponized drones. The original first generation was developed. The boys now have new toys. There's a second generation of drones. And so they've thrown away their old toys, and they wanted to deploy them and even offer them to local law enforcement for use in the United States. That's shocking and irresponsible. Ever since the end of the Civil War in the 1800s, we've drawn a very fine, clear line that requires the military to take action outside the United States to defend us, but not within our borders. That's the Posse Comitatus Act. And I find it disturbing that we have essentially erased that line through domestic spying. It would be even worse if we erased that line through deployment of what amount to military devices within our own borders. I had the either the fortune or the misfortune, depending upon how you look at it, to be in Bosnia during the war there as an observer. And it's a very disconcerting thing to see tanks rolling through the streets. I will tell you that that's not my reflection of my conception of what America ought to be like. I referred last year to the development of some new phenomenon. President Eisenhower referred to the military-industrial complex. What I'm starting to see is the emergence of the spying industrial complex. It's bad enough that we have people who think that in order to keep us safe and free, they have to intrude on our personal lives to the extraordinary degree that they already do. Now we're seeing the development of a corporate interest and a corporate base that consists of providing services to the government related to spying. And once we start in this path, we're never going to be able to stop it. It's bad enough right now that military contractors determine our foreign policy. I'd hate to see surveillance contractors determining our privacy policy. But the risk is there unless we stop it right where it starts. Any other questions? We have time for one more question.
I'm too short, Representative Grayson, so I'm very sorry that I'm a little bit off the screen.
Good things come in small packages.
Thank you very much. So it's not public yet, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but our office, I work with Access, is going to be, at your sponsorship, hosting a crypto party on Capitol Hill at the end of the month, and we're very excited for that with you and Representative Lofgren. And I was wondering if you could talk just for a couple minutes about your work on NIST and NSA, because it's something that I think is very important, and I know you're on the Science and Technology Committee and you're able to do a lot with that, and I think you focused on one of the underappreciated areas of NSA surveillance and the revelations that have happened over the last year.
Well, thanks. Access, along with the ACLU and some other organizations, have been real leaders in the fight for privacy. And I want to compliment you and also everyone who's joined you today at the meeting. The fight that we need to fight in order to remain human beings. The novel 1984 depicted a future that could happen and to some extent is happening. We had a vote earlier today on the question of whether the federal government would pay for cameras that would record everyone's license plates as they were driving around town. We already live in a world where, according to accurate, at least plausible reports, every single item that we send through the mail gets photographed. These are gross intrusions on our privacy. So what we've decided to do is to invite people to Capitol Hill to inform staffers and members who are interested in what some of these issues are and what perspectives to have on them. And, you know, I've been pleased to see that on both sides of the aisle, and not simply limited to libertarian Republicans, but mainstream Republicans as well, there is a serious concern about this. It's not always a concern that has the same roots as my concern, but the concern is nevertheless there. In some respects, it could turn into some kind of generic anti-government attack, but in this case, the government is so far overreaching any plausible limits that one can well understand why it's heading in that direction. So we find not just the Justin Amashas of the world who are willing to support amendments and other action in committee to limit the NSA, but also mainstream Republicans who realize that if people want to have secret communications, they ought to be able to do that. We shouldn't assume that everybody's a terrorist. You know, we try to say that we respect the principle of innocent until proven guilty. Actually, we've moved beyond guilty until proven innocent. According to the NSA and allied forces, everyone is guilty. Guilty now, guilty forever. And that's why they have to spy on you. And we have to stand up. I mean, we're not sheep, we're not cattle, we're human beings. And everyone who's in the room with you today is part of that fight. Everyone who is there attending this conference, you are helping to bring to birth an America where freedom is respected, where privacy is respected, and that America, which existed for so long, for 200 years, is now to a great degree already taken away from us. When we have our mail spied upon, we have our telephone calls spied upon, we have our internet usage spied upon, We simply are no longer autonomous human beings. Edward Snowden recently made the point that we shouldn't have to ask for our freedom to come back to us. We should take it. And I call upon everyone who's in the room today to join me in that effort to take back our freedom. I wish I had more time, but I don't. I enjoyed the time with you all. These were all excellent questions, and I appreciate that you're my allies in this fight. Thank you very much.